Yeah, my name is Jim Halbeisen, and this is my opinion.
Doing a special podcast for Growers Mineral today, and it's about frequently asked questions. We just received many questions, during the year, whether it's sales season or not, guys that are looking at us or individuals that are looking at us for the first time. And so we're going to try to segregate some of those questions and address them directly. One question we get is with hand spraying. Either the housewife, people that have greenhouse situations where they're spraying in the greenhouse. It's not a field situation, but we have a lot of gentlemen or individuals that are spraying crops with a backpack sprayer. And what we have seen over the years is people think a little is good, more is better, so they will concentrate or spray concentrated material, and that doesn't work. You're putting on way too much mineral. This will burn the plant tissue, and so you have a burning problem. And most cases, the plant will grow out of it. We had a gentleman spray dwarf apple trees with straight growers one time, and he said, "Man, this stuff worked faster than Roundup." Well, the situation was he put on straight material, and it's in a concentrated material for shipping because we're shipping a fairly long distance to some of our clientele, and so we had to get the concentration as high as we could and maintain a liquid state. So the advice I usually give people that are spraying with a hand sprayer, you want to mimic a field sprayer as best as you can with your speed and the coverage that you're putting on. And a concentration that we have found that's very, very safe is a 100 to 1 concentration where you have 100 parts of water and 1 part of growers. Now you have 128 ounces in a gallon of water, so to make 101 concentration, you would put 1.28 ounces of growers in 1 gallon of water. And this is a very safe concentration. I've had housewives that have sprayed it directly onto flowers or vegetable gardens and not burned the tissue at all. Now, you can elevate that concentration if you move much more quickly as you're spraying. And again, mimicking that field sprayer is really the thing that you wish to do. If you want to go to a 50 to 1 mixture, I have some very good customers that use 20 to 1 mixture. So again, depending on your experience with foliar feeding, the 100 to 1 is really the safe concentration for people that are not that adequate or haven't done a lot of hand spraying. So that seems to be a very safe rate. And the next question usually is, how often should I do it? Well, at 100 to 1, your fertility rate is a little lower, and if your plant is in some kind of fertility stress, you may want to do that every day for several days. And then the best advice I've ever received from a vegetable farmer was, you got to read your crop. In other words, the more experienced you are with the crop that you're growing, you know when the plant is doing better, when it's growing correctly. So as you use the foliar spray, as the plant starts to progress and gets healthier, you'll notice that, and then you can back down because, again, you don't need a lot of fertility to grow a plant. 96% of living plant tissue is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's sunlight, air, and water. Fertility side is very low. So again, the strategy is to try to get it on when the plant is in a stress situation.
What would you recommend to start with like a home gardener, somebody doing it for the first time?
Yeah, 100 to 1, definitely.
Just as far as in the soil, right, what kind of things?
Yeah. The total home gardener, the first thing to look at would be the calcium level in the soil. And farmers are soil testing to figure out that calcium level. Home gardener, you can do that. There are programs, by the institutions where they will do soil testing for you. We like to see the calcium level in the soil at a certain level that will let the plant perform better. And again, that in itself is an entire podcast. but that's where we would start. And then if you're looking at using growers mineral solutions, as far as a home gardener is concerned, the first thing would to make that 100-to-1 solution and then put that where you place your seed. As you set the plant, we have farmers that transplant solution, tomatoes, tobacco. They're using about maybe 10, 20 gallons of water, and we would like to see that basically on an acre with 1 gallon of growers. So make that 100-to-1 mixture and then pour a certain amount of that, maybe a quart or so, on to where the seed is being planted or to where the transplant is being planted. And then let the plant take root, get going. If you want to give it that 100-to-1 spray after it's up a little ways, you can do that. But then don't be very aggressive because you don't want the plant to over-vegetate. Then wait until you see reproductive set. And that's the blossoms that are on the plant. And then once you see blossoms that are about to open up, you want to do the 100-to-1 mixture. And then after the blooms open up, and the fruit starts to set, then you want to spray that 100-to-1 mixture probably every week at that point.
Another question from YouTube, what is growers' nutritional additive? Is it a liquid or powder?
Yeah. Nutritional additive is a product that helps the plant go into reproductive set. It's a liquid product that we have put together many years ago, back in the 60s, and you apply that with the foliar spray to try to invigorate the plant to be reproductive. When the plant first starts growing, when it comes out of the ground or you put the transplant in, it's secreting a growth regulator to make it vegetate, because what's the job? The plant has to have a certain amount of surface area to intercept sunlight, because its job is to turn that radiant energy into chemical energy, which is sugar. So as the plant tends to get size, it eventually goes through a trip mechanism, and usually it's the length of day that does that, has the plant go into what's called reproductive set. That's when the plant blooms, it fertilizes itself, or it fertilizes from another plant, and then you grow the fruit. And see, that set of that blossom is very key to the plant's survival. The job of the plant is to reproduce itself, and it does that through reproductive set, the bloom turning into fruit, which nurses the seed, which you replant again. So the nutritional additive is a growth regulator. It's called gibberellic acid. When the plant goes from vegetative growth and secreting the growth regulator abscisic acid, it starts to release the growth regulator called gibberellic acid, which is tripping the plant into reproductive set. What we do is spray a version of gibberellic acid in the growers' mineral solutions to strengthen the plant's ability to set that bloom set or reproductive set. There are like 13 different versions of gibberellic acid. This one is deemed by scientists to be the strongest one for reproductive set, so that's the one that we've kind of set with, and that's how farmers use it. There are certain agronomists that claim you can lose 85% of the bloom set of a soybean plant from stress. And see, what we're trying to do is invigorate that plant to maintain that bloom set, which again is going to lead to seed production, and hopefully that will increase yield. The amount or the type of farmers that use nutritional additive is mostly seed producers, although we have some people in the vegetable industry that work with it to try to get more fruit set onto the plant. The big problem or the challenge with nutritional additive is timing. You got to figure out when the plant is actually in that reproductive set stress period. And figuring that out, again, the more you know about your plant, the better you are at finding that particular set. When foliar feeding plants, timing is related to the most effective time for the plant, and then everybody goes on the philosophy, a little is good, more is better, and that's not necessarily true. So trying to figure out when the best timing is on the plant, it still goes back to reproductive set. Now, when the plant emerges and comes out of the ground, it can be growing very healthily and have no stress at all. But if you get excess rain or if you go through a dry cycle, the plant will struggle and not have the ability to pull nutrition, basically. So figuring out that timing is, again, how adroit or as good as you are at knowing your crop. We give you general guidelines. For example, with like a corn crop, once it comes out of the ground, you would like it to get to a size where when you foliar spray it, most of the material ends up onto the plant. But again, at V6 stage, growth stage, V8 stage, that's when the plant is expanding its cell structure very rapidly. The need for nutrients is very high at that point. That's a good time to foliar spray. Then the other time is at what we call pre-tassel, because the plant is getting ready for reproductive set at that point, and so you're putting the nutrients on to help overcome that stress period. It's just like an animal. An animal goes through stress through procreation, and see the plant is doing the same thing. So you're trying to give the plant everything it needs to give you the maximum amount of reproductive set. And time of day, that's another key issue that we've talked about for many, many years. We like to see a little accumulation of moisture onto the leaf surface. The plant gutates. In other words, it's times when it takes moisture out of the internal mechanism of the plant and lays it on the leaf, like a very humid night. And then what we're trying to do is dissolve the minerals that are in grower's mineral in that moisture, because the plant will reabsorb the moisture. And once you do that, it's inside the plant's physical structure, and then the plant can utilize it as it wishes. One key point about foliar spraying that nobody pays any attention to is that the amount of minerals that are in that spray are much more than what the plant actually needs at that particular time. So people feel that all those nutrients are just laying there in that leaf tissue. That's not correct. The plant will actually translocate those minerals to the root zone and then use that during the rhizophase cycle of plant growth. And what that does is put the minerals into the microbes that are in the soil. And then later they can draw from that nutrient reservoir from the microbes through this symbiosis between the microbes and the plant. That's what's very critical about the product, and the fact that we're using very clean materials, high-grade materials, because we're feeding the plant, plus we're feeding the microbes that will refeed the plant. So we're trying to get into the physical cycle of the synergy between the plant and the microbes, which is the way plants have adapted over eons of time to actually grow. And we feel by doing that, we don't need near as many minerals that have to be applied to get the job done as far as reproductive set. Plus, you're using much cleaner minerals to do that.
There are foliar calcium products now that can move within the plant, translocating from the leaves and other parts. Still, I believe the benefits of calcium in the soil are far more multifaceted. So I use foliar calcium mainly as a rescue treatment. One more thing, Carrie Reams talked about how all the nutrients must enter the plant in phosphate form. What are your thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul, you've hit so many issues here. This would be a full skull session in itself. We base a lot of our work on the work that was done by Michigan State University in the early 1950s. After the U.S. exploded the atomic bomb during World War II, the PR, the public relations of the United States with the rest of the world was not very good. And so the U.S. government was trying to figure out how to show radioactive research would be beneficial to mankind, not just destroy mankind. And so what the horticulturalists at Michigan State did was to take radioactive isotope tracers and monitor them in plants. So they would make radioactive isotopes out of things like calcium, phosphorus, nitrogen, potassium, and then feed it to the plant and try to follow it. And what they found was that any calcium product that was sprayed on the leaf penetrated the leaf, but it did not translocate through the plant. They could not find it in the root zone. Whereas when they did the reverse, when they fed the radioactive calcium to the root, it translocated totally through the plant. So we have always tended to lean toward keeping that calcium in the soil, in the root zone, so that the plant can move it up the plant and distribute it throughout the plant. Now, your idea of a rescue treatment with the calcium bitter pit and things like that in the apple industry, they've had some success with foliar calcium products. And what the researchers said at Michigan State University was that the calcium did penetrate the leaf, but it did not translocate through the plant itself. So again, that translocation is a very big issue to make sure that the entire plant is receiving the calcium. The other factor that you talk about with tying elements to the phosphorus, that Michigan State researchers found that to be true also, that phosphorus moves very readily through the plant when you apply it onto the leaf surface or if you put it in the root zone. And they're saying that basically the phosphorus will pull other elements with it into the plant and distribute it throughout the plant. And I think one of the most characteristic factor of that is glyphosate or Roundup. The phosphorus, they're using technical grade phosphorus to manufacture glyphosate, or the best working glyphosates are technical grade phosphorus, because that will draw the organic radical into the plant. And anybody that's worked with Roundup knows that it's not a burn down style of herbicide. It basically goes into the root zone and damages the root zone of the plant. And see, we're basically using the same philosophy with growers' mineral nutrition, only we're doing the exact opposite of corporate agriculture. We're trying to nourish the crop, and we're getting those elements throughout the plant by the use of the technical grade phosphorus, whether it be foliar fed or if we're using it in the soil, in furrow or 2x2, getting those elements into the plant by associating with the high-grade phosphorus, we think, is what creates the success of growers' mineral solutions. When we are discussing foliar feeding of growers and talking about the technical grade phosphorus that we use to manufacture it, it's a very reactive phosphorus. And when you expose it to the minerals that are in hard water, again, that's another entire podcast on its own. The dissolved solid load that's in water and how that reacts with technical grade phosphorus is very, very key. A regular or a farmer that mixes growers in with a hard water with high dissolved solids, he gets precipitates that are constantly plugging screens, plugging nozzles, and see that's a big issue. Now, from our standpoint, that precipitation that you see that's plugging the screens and the nozzles is inactivating some of the minerals that are in growers, so it doesn't work quite as well as it should. So knowing the dissolved solid load in your water or the quality of your water is very, very critical. And so one of the ways to neutralize that total dissolved solid part of water or hard water is to add acid to it. And see, the acid basically latches on to those minerals and renders them unreactive so that they don't interact with the phosphorus, particularly in the grower's mineral solutions. So we've tried to coach guys on how to use acids, citric acid, vinegar. We've even had people use sulfuric, phosphoric acid to neutralize their water. But we've really tried to tell people that rainwater is your best material, that's your cheapest material. We have some very good customers that have reverse osmosis units where they've removed the dissolved solids and then they've been able to not have any problems with mixing it with the growers. Actually, they've found that that dissolved solid load is very detrimental to any compound they use, even organic radicals, insecticide, pesticides. Whether it would have an effect on like humic acids and that. We don't have enough background with that because nobody has been spraying them for that period of time. And the same with sugars. Do they interact with the dissolved solids when people are spraying them? So the water thing, using acids to try to neutralize that dissolved solid is a big issue. Trying to get around that by using rainwater or using a filtration system just depends on where the economics lie. So we know that it's a very important thing. We try to specify and talk about it a lot, but it's a complicated issue. Water is not, you hold up a glass of water, it looks pretty clear, no problems. The active minerals in there, when you put another material in there, will chemically interact, and it can give you some very serious problems.
A jar test is something anyone can do?
Right. The jar test, which was the original question, is we tell people to take like 15 ounces of their water, put 1 ounce of grower's mineral solutions in it, shake it up real good, and set it on a windowsill for 4 or 5 days and watch it. And if it stays clear, you don't have very many dissolved solids in that water. But if you start to see white precipitate in there, like the snow globes that you see at Christmas time, now you've got chemical interaction. And see, that particulate matter will that'll give you problems with spraying, but it is actually taken away some of the minerals of the growers from having activity. So, and jar testing of other compounds, like if you mix growers with another compound, sugar or humic acid or an insecticide, you should always do a jar test proportionately and then see what you have before you mix up a 500 or 1,000 gallon tank and you end up with Jell-O. And nobody's happy in that particular situation. So the jar test is a very simple thing to do. Usually you use proportionally of the compounds you're working with and then give it some time. A lot of people want to wait till the last moment, and you shouldn't do that. You should try to get it ahead of time so that if you do have some problems, you can try to figure out how to make the adjustment.
We had another question that was kind of based off of this. Do carbon-based carriers like humic acid, fulvic acid, molasses, or sugar help with GMS absorption?
The idea is that humic acids, which is a simple name for some very intricate compounds, and then it's a sugar. So you have carbon bonds in there. When you break carbon bonds, that gives you energy. Some people are spraying that with growers to try to invigorate the plant, to translocate it into the soil where the microbes get a hold of it. You're also spraying it onto the microbes that are on the plant surface itself. And again, that's kind of a trial and error thing. We have guys that do that. We have guys that have done it that didn't feel it gave them any increase in reproductive activity. So again, that's a trial and error basis, and there's a lot of theory behind that. But at growers, the principles we have is test everything out. See what it does. If it pays the bills and gives you extra income, hey, it's something to work with. The strip test, which that could be another podcast, what we would talk a lot about. It's very critical with these types of materials because they're kind of in their infancy, and established agriculture is working. Some of the big companies have purchased some of these smaller firms that have devised biological feeds, humic acid products, sugar products, to try to expand their base of clientele. And again, it's all going back to microbiological life, and that definitely we'll have to do a podcast on that. That's very, very significant.
We got a question from the video with Jerry Stutzman about biochar, using GMS in combination with biochar. If so, what goes down first, the calcium or the biochar? Can they be mixed together, then applied with GMS?
The biochar is it's like an activated charcoal, and what you've done is tried to take organic material and incinerate it to a temperature that you end up with a certain combination of carbon with oxygen. And then that serves as feed for the microbes in the soil. And some people are doing some foliar work with it, but the majority are adding it to the soil to try to invigorate microbiological life in the soil. Our experience with that at this point is mixing calcium with it. As I say at different meetings that we conduct, that you need structural elements to grow the microbes in the soil. Your grandmother was very good at it. She made you clean up everything on your plate because why? You had the structural elements from the lima beans, and then before you were ever going to get any apple pie. And see, the biochar is kind of a mimic of the apple pie, so when we put the calcium with it, we're bringing the structure of the lima beans to the table at that point. And see, growers is basically the same way. We have people that are trying to cover the biochar with growers so that you're exposing the microbes to both energy and structural elements. And see, the calcium, we feel, does several things. It gives structure to the microbes consuming it, but it also helps flocculate the soil so that you're getting good airspace into the soil, because the symbiotic microbes need to breathe. I always talk about you can live, 3 weeks without eating, you can live 3 days without drinking, but when you have your oxygen cut off, you got about 3 minutes. And see, the symbiotic microbes in the soil are very similar to that. So the calcium is aiding that by helping to flocculate the soil. And the biochar is flocculating the soil also. But until you get that combination where both of them are working, in tandem, it's not going to be as successful. And the guys that we have working with it are seeing some very nice things. And we've met some people in the field that have been in mainstream agriculture that have latched on to some biochar. They're mixing a very good calcium product with it and then spreading that on the land. And at certain rates, they've been able to walk away from their total fertility program and get everything from the biochar, the calcium, and the soil itself. And the philosophy there is healthy plant tissue is 96% sunlight, air, and water, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Supplying the minerals correctly through the biological chain, you can grow a very competitive crop with very minimal amount of input.
Another question about aragonite. I think that was something you guys talked about. Can you just quickly talk about what is aragonite, and also just how would you buy that if you were maybe looking at a home garden?
The majority of calcium is deposited in the Earth's crust as calcium carbonate. And the way it is placed in the Earth's crust varies very significantly. Some are in deeper deposits that have more pressure, weight of the crust on it, so that the bond is a lot stronger. Aragonite is more of a softer product. It's developed usually from sea life and in a position where it doesn't have the pressure so that it's a more soluble material. The problem is it's not very ubiquitous like calcium carbonate rock, which are in different deposits, around the world. And when you mine that, that has to be ground up and made relatively fine to make it soluble. Whereas the aragonite, when you mine it, it's not very deep. It doesn't have near the hardness to it, and it's much more soluble. So theoretically, you should be able to use less of that than you would of the ground up rock. The biggest problem is where is it at? What's the transportation cost to get it to you? So many times the aragonite is very expensive. I don't disagree that it is much more usable, but the ratio between it and the amount of ground rock you have to put on, it's going to depend on the cost factor. And so again, we're back to the same situation as we were before. You got to do the strip test. You have to work with the products, compare them to each other. What's the cost? What's the results? And that's what a lot of our clients that are working with aragonite, and the biochar is where we're seeing more comparisons or utilization to get the symmetry between the two products, so that the symbiosis is much better and that the biological uses it better, therefore the plant will use it better.
Rates for in-furrow application for crops?
When you're working with growers' mineral solutions and the volume that you're going to use, that's always a big question by the operator. Well, your stuff is expensive. How much do I have to use? So what we do is put out general guidelines, and farmers work with it, and then kind of decide, where their key rate is at. The general rate on corn, for example, when you're putting it in furrow as a starter, usually when you're at 30,000 plants, we suggest that a farmer use between 4 or 5 gallon, directly in the furrow as an in-furrow application. Some farmers are taking that 4 or 5 and reducing it to 1.5 to 2, and then they're taking the other 3 gallon and putting it over 2 by 2. The industry is talking about this kind of express train rate. In other words, you give so much to the seed to get it going, and then as the plant gets bigger, the root reaches over to another area to gain more fertility. And there are many growers, customers, old line growers, customers that have started doing that. We do it in our operation where we're putting maybe 2.5 to 3 in furrow, and then we're using maybe 3 to 4 over at the 2 by 2 position. And see that, why do we do that? Just our experience with using the product. And we're planting, my nephew likes to push it up a little bit. We've gone to maybe 33,000 plants per acre. And see, the more plants you have, the more tissue you have to maintain, so the volume that you use would be more. Now, we'll come back with 1 3-gallon foliar spray, so on 33,000 plants, we'll be in that 8, 9, 10 gallons per acre range. And that seems to be where a lot of our old line customers are at. Now, you work with something like soybeans, you wouldn't need near that rate. Some guys aren't set up to put it on the seed, but as we see earlier planting of soybeans, some guys feel they want to get a little on, and I wouldn't go much over 1 gallon per acre. And then I would come back with 3 to 4 on the foliage and end up with maybe 5 on soybeans. And see, other crops, it's going to vary. Our experience will kind of guide you. We have a little recommendation book that tells you what we recommend, but that's only a starting point. You need to talk to other farmers or reps that have worked with the product. That's why the majority of our reps are farmers, because they've worked with the product. They know where these rates are at, that you'll see the better success.
What's one thing that you've changed your mind about in farming?
Something new. In other words, what my predecessor used to say, the only difference between a rut and the grave is the length and the depth. And when I was younger, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, but now, the age I am now, makes total sense. You know, when somebody comes up with a new idea, you need to evaluate it a little bit and see if it's got any credibility. There's things that are out there on the fringe that are totally ridiculous, but you've seen things over the years that have happened that make some ideas not totally ridiculous. So I would say that part of it being, you know, a little more conservative and not accepting new things, but listening to new things, I would say for me is a change. And again, the things that are coming into agriculture, like auto steer, AI, and that type of thing, I still say the farmer is the key, but these other things can help the farmer be better at his trade. And it's always the same problem. What can you afford? And that's probably the thing that makes you the most conservative, in my opinion, because you got to pay the bills. And so being open to new ideas is easier, I would say, but still with a conservative view of it, in my opinion.
All right, last question. What is the weirdest question a farmer's ever asked you?
What's the what?
What is the weirdest question
Weirdest?
you've ever gotten from a farmer?
Ooh, that's a good one. Probably, can I predict the volume of the grower's mineral solutions that gets into the plant directly? And it's not a weird question, but it's a very profound question, because when you're applying stuff, for example, you know, this spring we planted a field of corn, and man, we just got inundated with water. And you know, we had several fields where in the low spots, you know, the corn was probably under a foot or foot and a half of water. You go by that spot today, and man, you can see that plant growing through there. So how much of that fertility is left in that soil? And see, we think this is another benefit of using growers' mineral solutions. The fact that it is high-grade material, when you apply it to the soil, the beneficial microbes consume it completely and put it into their tissue. And see, they are basically stuck to the soil particles, so that water didn't move them at all. Whereas when you put a toxic fertilizer on, it basically has to go through a transformation so the beneficials to use it. And that takes a period of time, so some of that can be basically washed away. I always felt that, and we've had guys kind of seen this over the years, where they put a cover crop in after they've grown a crop. For example, the protocol today is back of your corn, you put in a cover crop for the soybeans that are coming on. Well, some of our gentlemen, when they would put that cover crop in corn, they couldn't figure out where those green rows were coming from. Well, what they figured out was that was the growers that was left over that they applied to the corn plant. And see, those microbes got a hold of that, and you've got more fertility, you know, where that growers was at. So you've embellished that microbiological life to feed the next crop. And so I would say we're thinking that most of this fertility or the minerals in growers' mineral, we think it's all sticking in the soil. It's there. And now it's just a matter of that getting into the crop when the crop needs it. And so that's the real challenge at that point, in my opinion. But that, you know, the first time a guy hit me with that was probably 30 years ago. And see, at that point, the knowledge of microbiological life in soil wasn't, examined. This is after COVID-19. What you've got in cancer research at this point, in using microbiological life to try to counteract disease, this microbiological thing has gotten much more traction. When I present meetings in the wintertime for Growers Mineral Solutions, at these, we bring farmers into a central place, and we just have a little session, basically. The ones that are the most successful, in my opinion, are when guys just have question after question after question. So if anything we've talked about here today you have more questions about, certainly with this electronic age, I'll tell you, I've been a little resistant to the electronic age, but Russ and Osa have been dragging me kicking and screaming, and this is a chance for you to interact, and we'll give you our version of what we've been talking about.
This podcast has been brought to you by Growers Mineral. Please visit growersmineral.com.